Welcome, low ego action heroes. I'm Debbie Levitt from Delta CX. We are a full service CX and UX consultancy. And this is my Axure 10 Core Skills course. I've been using Axure since February 2011, and I've been teaching it for many, many years. And in fact, I've been one of Axure's recommended trainers since 2014. This course is designed to take you from super Axure newbie or Axure afraid all the way through to confident intermediate. So if you've landed on this one video, there are many, many others. Please check our Axure lessons playlist for a lot more videos about using Axure. The Delta CX YouTube channel has over 500 videos on it as of when I'm recording this in December 2021, and I hope you'll subscribe and join in some of our live streams. I'm live usually 3 or 4 times a week with teaching UX research and design, talking about CX, helping people get into the profession, helping leaders and managers, and of course, don't forget Tuesday, office hours, Ask Me Anything. So subscribe and hang out here. So thanks for being here. Please subscribe and let's jump into that next Axure lesson.
In this lesson, we'll learn how to build tabs, and at the end of the lesson, we'll compare the tabs we built to the default tabs that Axure has in the sample UI patterns library. Because again, you're not going to know how to manipulate theirs if you don't know how to build your own from scratch. So let's start with a dynamic panel. And I'm going to name it Tabs Panel. And we need to get some content in here so that as you move to different tabs, you can see that the correct thing is showing up. So let's jump in and make a few different states and put some different content in the different states like we did before. So I will just put some text in there. Now you can do whatever you want with coloring and of course fonts. In general, I find that a lot of tabs on pages tend to have a white background, but of course they don't have to. So if you want to give yours colored backgrounds or things like that, you are certainly welcome to. But just to help us know where we are, I'm going to write tab 1. Ooh, let's put this at the top. And that way we can see we're in tab 1. And I can duplicate this. So let's call this, we can call it state 1 or we can give it a more specific name. If you had particular content in here, you could name it by what the content is so that you remember, because you might not know which content is in 1 or 2 or 3. So we can pretend that this is our description. Let's imagine we have a little e-commerce thing going here. Maybe these are our reviews, and I'll put tab 2 in here, or I could call it reviews. And again, these are just placeholders for whatever would actually be inside the tab. That's less important. I just want to make sure you know the technique. You can always try it out with different content. And let's go back into that isolated view and make one more. And duplicate it. And now we can call this one... Let's see, sometimes in e-commerce it might have ingredients or materials, just for fun. Could have specifications. And again, if I want to reorder these, I can reorder these so that reviews is second, totally up to you. So as long as we have 3 tabs where we've pretended we have 3 different blocks of content, and hopefully I spelled things well enough for our example. Now, we also we're definitely going to need some tabs, and I like to build my tabs out of the box. So I can bring a box up here, and I can make it significantly smaller. Again, the size and shape of the tabs would be a design choice. That's totally up to you. No right or wrong answer. I just did the down arrow so that it lines up with the box a little better, but I might move it back later once I play with this a little bit more. So we might have tab 1, and I'm just going to copy paste this quickly and make 2 and 3. And of course, as you might imagine, we're going to need our old friend global widget styles, where we're going to say, what does a tab look like when it's been selected, and what does a tab look like when it is not yet selected, but certainly not disabled. So I have the dynamic panel here, and my tabs happen to be 90 by 40. You can make yours whatever size you want. But let's make those global widget styles right now. So I'm going to grab the project menu, widget style manager. I'll jump in here under my pagination dots. The order doesn't matter. And I will create tab unselected, which is what does it look like when the tab is available to be chosen but is not the chosen one. So let's give it a blue font. The fill color would be white. I'm worried that if I made it gray, it might look disabled. It might have an outside line, so border thickness of 1 with whatever Axure's default color is. I don't feel too picky right now. And of course, how do you want your text to align? Sometimes people like tabs to align left with a little bit of padding, and sometimes they like the text to be centered. So again, total design choice is up to you. Now I'm going to duplicate that for my tab selected. And I'm going to change some of the coloring. So we could say that a selected tab maybe has this blue color. By the way, I am not by any means saying that this is going to be a good looking design or traditional for tabs. You just have to play with it and decide what you want yours to look like. So let's say we've got those two. Now, remember, we've created styles, but we haven't applied them. And remember, the rule of thumb is to always apply the default unselected style to your widgets. So I'm going to apply tab unselected to all three. There we go. And then I'm going to come over to our interactions pane and our properties and add the style effect for what they look like when they're selected. Resist the temptation to make a manual style and give it tab selected. And again, we can decide later if we like the way that looks. Remember that the newbie mistake here is to say that tab 1 has a selected style because you want it selected by default. The problem is that if you chose tab selected as its default style, that is the style for selected false. What would the style be for selected true when we want it to look like this when it's selected true? So don't fall into that newbie mistake. Since we want tab 1 to be selected by default, the best way to go is to check the box for selected. Now that one has the selected look. And of course, you might say, I don't like the way these tabs look. They don't look very tabby. Let's do something different. We can just go back into our global widget styles and make some changes. Let's say that our tab selected has a border color that matches the rest of the color, so that it doesn't have an obvious line. And let's also say that the border visibility, we don't have a bottom line. It will blend right into the content. Let's say tab unselected, same thing. It doesn't have a bottom line. And we can also give it some rounded corners. We can give these, let's give it a 12, and we'd want to also give our tab selected a 12. Otherwise, that's going to be awkward. And let's see how it looks now. There we go. That's a little bit more tabby tab if you ask me. So before we talk about what kind of box or shape we should be using for the content, let's do a little bit of building. Now, another thing that you might have noticed about these tabs is that only one can be selected at a time. If we select one, we want the others to be unselected or selected false. And that should make you think, there can be only one, which means we want to go back to the interactions pane, show all, and get them in a selection group. I'll call it tabs so that it's a unique name for this page. That's all it has to be, a unique name for this page, and it is. So now we can teach Axure when people click on a tab. So think about the user's intent and what typically happens when tabs function. When people click on a tab, they want to change the content to that tab. So that's going to be changing the panel state so that we are seeing a different picture in the frame. And we're going to set the tab to selected true so that it looks like it is the lit up or selected tab. So since tab 1 is selected by default and the content can already be seen, for practice, let's start building on tab 2. So I'm going to build on tab 2 and I'm going to pop out my editor. What happens? Click or tap. And then what are the actions? So we're going to have set selected for, and we can say this, we don't have to say tab 2. We can use our friendly shortcut because we're working on tab 2, so tab 2 is this. And we want to set it to true. And we also want to change the panel state so that the content will also change. Change tabs panel to reviews. Let's say reviews is our second state. And in fact, we can make these tabs match that if we want. This can say reviews, this can say description, and this can say ingredients. A little bit more realistic, but again, just for fun. So now we can do a refresh over here in our preview, and we can see this looks okay, but a little weird because we didn't put some sort of box around the content, but I'll talk about that in a moment. Let's get the functions working and then we'll talk about some of our options for putting a box around the content. So I can say reviews, and there we go. We can see the content changed because this one says reviews. Now I can't click back to description just yet because we didn't build that. So let's do it. Now, here's an example of where we could copy and paste this interaction, but we would still have to fix it and change it because it's not identical across the board. So I'm going to come over here and say copy. Let's grab description, and I'm going to do paste on my keyboard. Control V, paste. Now let's take a look at what we've told Axure. If someone clicks on description, set this to true. Okay, this is now description. That'll work. And set the tabs panel to reviews. Uh-oh, that's not what we wanted. We're going to have to fix this. So chances are the copy paste saved us a few seconds, but we still had to take a look at it and make sure it was right and then fix it because it wasn't. So let's do it paste here. And we'll have to fix this one as well. We don't want it to go to reviews. We want it to go to ingredients. All right, let's test this to make sure all three tabs are now working. You're also testing to make sure that only one is selected at a time. If you are clicking these and you're finding that multiple ones are looking selected, then you forgot to do your there can be only one selection group for all three. So it looks like this is working, which means it's time to talk about our options for this box. And since I'm going to talk about a few different options, just for fun, let's place something under this on the page. Chances are the tabs are not the bottom of our page. There's probably something underneath it, so I'm going to use this placeholder widget to pretend that there's either more content on the page or a footer. There's got to be something. The tabs would not be the bottom of our page. Now, what are some ways that we could draw a box around this stuff? Well, if everything is going to be the same size, if all of the content is always the same size and all of our all of our panel states are the same size, we could just throw a box behind the whole thing. So I could throw a box here. I could, let's give it a name so we can easily find it later. Tabs, background, box. And I will send it to the back. And we've got this, and we can take a look at how it looks. A little funky because of the colors that I chose, but it's kind of the right idea. So this means chances are it would probably look better for our tabs to have the active one as white and to have the other ones as some sort of other color. So just to help the realism here, or the visual design, let's switch that around. Let's say that the selected tab is actually white. And you might think, Deb, I can't believe you took us down the wrong path. I think it's great to experiment with this stuff and see what it does and get to know it so that you can better control it when you are working and know how to troubleshoot these types of mistakes. Okay, so I have made a black line with a black font with a white fill, which means our unselected ones, maybe they've got a black line, border. Oh, there we go. Font color, and let's give the fill a little bit of a soft color, something that's not gray, so that it hopefully hints to people that these are usable tabs. Let's take a look. All right, that looks a little bit more realistic. Technically, there was nothing completely wrong with the other one. There was just something about the visual styling that made this look a little bit weird. So we want to make sure that as we click through, we get that nice flowy look. Now, if you have a solid box here and you're not getting this white flowy thing, here's what's probably happening. If you select both the box and the dynamic panel, because remember there's two widgets here, we can see this in our outline. Let's collapse this for a moment and get a better look at our outline. So here we have the tabs background box, which we sent to the back, and we also have the tabs panel. Remember there's two widgets here. If we only move one widget, we left the box and we moved the panel. So make sure you are grabbing both the box and the panel. And if I go down 1 or 2 pixels with my keyboard arrow and then refresh this, you'll see, there is that line. So the trick that I like to do here is just to nudge this up 1 or 2 pixels until I see that line go away because it has blended into that white tab. There we go. Now let's do a few variations of these because there are different visual design styles for tabs right now, and I want to make sure that we've played with all of them at least a little bit so that you can have a sense of what might work for you. I'm going to make a totally different set of visual design tabs based on a pretty common design that you see now, which is not to have tabby shaped tabs, but in fact to have kind of lines underneath the words. So I'll just come in here and I'll make 2 new styles just so you can see something different. I will call this tabs line selected. So if it's the selected one, let's imagine that we have a black font color, maybe it's bold, maybe we've got a line under it, and maybe that line is kind of a fun strong color. Maybe that line is a little bit on the thick side. Let's try 4 and see what we think. Also, we don't want a box, we only want the underline. So we can say this tab only has a bottom line, which means we don't need a corner radius, there won't be corners. And we can duplicate this and create our unselected version. We might say that the tabs have a blue font and they've got a smaller line or thinner line under them. Maybe that line is black or some other color that would hint that this is active. And let's see how that looks. All right, so we've created styles, but we have not assigned styles. So here we go. We're going to select all 3 of these tabs, and instead of tab unselected, we're going to give them tab line unselected. And then we're going to come over here to our style effects and we're going to click on selected style. And instead of tab selected, we're going to give them tab line selected. Now let's take a look at what this looks like. Okay, so this looks a little bit weird because of this box here. So let's try removing that box. Click, click. So that dumped me right into the panel. I did not want that. So I'm going to find it here. Let's see, tabs background box. That would be this one. I'm looking for the other one. And this is getting a bit long. So I could use the search and I could say show all the background boxes. All right, that's the one we wanted. Delete. All right, let's take a second look at this. Okay, close. The problem, who can guess the problem here? Why don't any of these tabs look selected? Why do they look all selected? Because, yes, there can be only one. You're close. But what happened was because I copied and pasted them, they have the same selection group as this one. And that meant that Axure said, oh, okay, across these 6 things that are in the same group, there can only be one selected, and it's this first one. So we need to make another group, I'll call it tabs line, and now we should have two sets of there can be only one. So that might be another style that you want to use for your tabs. Again, you might not agree with some of the visual design choices I've made for fun, but you can see how that would look and why in that case the box around it probably doesn't work. You'd probably go with white or a solid color. Now there's one other thing to consider when we're dealing with tabs. So I'm going to copy and paste our first one again because it has our box and I want to make sure we are thinking about this box. So let's bring this one out here. And once again, I want to delete the background box. So I've selected it from the outline. They've selected it over here. That's how I know it's the right one because these things have the same name. I've got two tabs background box. One lives over here and one lives over here. Let's delete this one. Now, and I'm going to X this out since we don't need the search right now. Now, I want to talk about what happens if content in our tabs have different sizes, different lengths. Let's imagine that our tabs have a fixed width because it's in a side column or it's the width of the page and it's not going to get any wider. But what if the content is longer? Let's jump into one of these tabs and give it longer content. So let's imagine perhaps that our ingredients is really long. So I'm going to copy and paste it a couple of times and just pretend that whatever is going on in this tab, it just happens to be longer than the other tabs. And space these out a little, and there you go. Again, just as kind of a placeholder thing. Now, you might look at this and say, okay, Deb, what's going to happen here? Well, first let's figure out if our tab is fit to content or not. We talked about fit to content before, and we talked about how if it is not checked, then the boundaries of the panel, the picture frame, do not change. So if I refresh, you can see that when I go over here to ingredients, it is cut off because that is the boundary of the panel, and that is that. Also, let's give these their own group because there can be only one, but they're part of the other one. I'll call this tabs 3 just to mix it up a little bit. So now if we say, okay, let's fit to content, I've got some stuff that's going to be longer than other stuff. Axure says, cool, I'm on it. Now notice the first thing it did was it made the panel smaller than these other panels are. Why? Because that's the size of the content. If we take a look at these panels, this is the size of the content. It is that box with the text in it, and that is where this panel ends. This panel ends as soon as that ends. If you need to buy yourself some space, sometimes I sneak in white boxes as placeholders. It's a little bit old school, but it would certainly work. You can also extend the size of this box if you would like. Extending it to the left and the right might change how your text wraps. So you might not want that. Undo. So if you wanted it longer, you could do that. If you wanted to buy a little space left to right, you could throw in a white box that only you know is there. So now we've got these tabs and we've got 3 states of the panel that technically have different sizes. Let's take a look in the preview of what it looks like now that we said that we have this one and this one and this longer one. And now you're thinking, uh-oh, Deb, that's not what I would have wanted. That looks like it's going to overlap whatever is underneath it on the page, and we probably don't want that. So what are we going to do? This is where we can learn a little bit about a special feature Axure has called push-pull widgets. And what happens is when a panel state changes, or when something shows or hides, you can tell Axure, hey, there's going to be stuff underneath this that we need to move out of the way. Or there's going to be stuff next to this that we need to move out of the way. And we're going to practice this again in a later lesson, but we can practice it here as well. So we can say, hey, Axure, you know, when ingredients shows up, it might be bigger than everything else. I'm going to need you to move everything underneath it out of the way. Now, this is a parameter of the set panel state or the show and hide. You'll see it in both places. It lives under special behavior. So the question is, do we want to push-pull things that are below it, or are we looking to push-pull things to the side because whatever showed up is going to move things to the side? I have almost never used the push to the right. Typically, you are using push-pull below. Now let's take a look at some of the choices Axure gives us for how much does it want how much do we want Axure to move stuff out of the way? We've got some choices here. Do we want it to be the height change of the new state? So let's take a moment and make sure we have our heads wrapped around that. When the smaller description state changes to the longer ingredient state, what is the height change? Is that the amount of space you want Axure to move? If so, just choose height of new state and Axure will calculate it for you. If you have some other number or calculation you want, you can put it there. That is definitely more advanced, and I do tend to teach people that in our advanced course, but let's see if we can get away with not going advanced here and just using the height change. If we want to watch everything underneath it slide out of the way, then we probably want some sort of animation. So let's do a baby step test and see how this looks. Refresh. So from description to ingredients, there we go. And the page did get longer. We had new scroll bars. This got longer, and it only moved the amount of space of the height difference between this state and this state. If you wanted more space, you could go back in and make this state longer by longer text box, putting in a hotspot. I said a white box before, but you know what? A hotspot would be even better. I love hotspots. So you can control that if you want without having to do the custom calculation choice that we saw. Now, if I click description, it didn't move back up. So we have to go into each one and build push, pull in. And so if something gets bigger, Axure will push, and if something gets smaller, Axure will pull. It knows that automatically, but we will have to add that for each of our buttons. So tabs panel to description, more options, special behavior, push, pull below, height change, slide, linear slide. Now, yeah, that's looking good. Let's do reviews and give it some more testing. Yeah. Because I was thinking, could I copy paste this? But then I realized I could copy paste it, but then like we did before, I would have to go in and change which state we're changing to. That is not, there's no this in here, and so we need to, we would have to change that so you couldn't totally copy and paste it without having to fix it. So description, reviews. Now, why did it move just now? Remember, we did make a small difference between the description panel and the reviews panel. Let's take another look. The description panel and the reviews panel are slightly different sizes, and we just saw that. So what happened was when we moved from description to reviews, Axure pulled up. Axure said, you know, it looks like there's 20, 30 pixels here. Well, let's see what it is. This is height of 135. This is height of 167. Okay, there's 32 pixels here that you don't have here. I'm going to have to pull it up. So this is a great reminder to make everything match. Unless, of course, it doesn't match, like this one. We can make this one a little bit longer if we want to have more space on the bottom. Okay, so now there shouldn't be any push-pull between the first two because they are the same heights. Let's refresh and see this again. So description, reviews, ingredients. Okay, looking good. Now let's keep testing by picking another one of these and see if Axure pulls back up. Pull. Cool, this is working. Now you might say, Deb, that's a little bit dizzying, all this sliding and stuff. Remember, you just have to change the animation on the interaction. If you don't like that whole slide thing, then you just have to come in here and where it says more options, push pull with a linear slide, you would just say none, for example. So let's try none only on ingredients so you can see the difference. Refresh, ingredients, boom. There was no slide, it just time traveled. to the new location. Now remember, if you do have a side column push-pulling stuff under it, remember that you might now have a big open space here. So you just have to be careful in your design that it's doing what you intend, and that if you end up with a big open space, you meant to do that, or you have something else that happens to fill this space, or nothing happens and you just have a space. I mean, that's one of the downside of working in columns, is sometimes one column has more content than another, and we do have some dead space. So just something for you to watch out when you are doing your interaction design. Okay, so we've taken a look at tabs a few different ways, and now just for fun, I want to go into Axure's default UI component in their library for tabs, and let's take a look at how they've built it so that we can see how we would either use it or not use it or adjust it. So let's drag it out. And of course, the first thing I notice, let's collapse this to get a better look at it in the outline. The first thing I notice is that this folder icon tells me it's a group. I don't know why it's grouped. I mean, I guess it's grouped so that you can move it all together as one unit. That's fine, but you know me, I'm a serial ungrouper, and I want to get a little bit more into what's going on here. So I'm going to ungroup this because I'm a serial ungrouper. So we've got a panel. It's got 3 choices here. Let's take a look at what those are. Okay, so they just made placeholder 1, 2, 3. That's fine. And for their tabs, now the tabs are also grouped. Again, I look at that and I say, why is that grouped? I guess because you want to move them together, but you know, I don't know. Also notice they are send to back in this case. We did something different. We made sure our outside line was sent to back, but the tab content isn't necessarily. So let's ungroup these because I don't know why they're grouped, and I'm a serial ungrouper. Let's take a look at tab 1. So they've got set selected true. Okay, same thing we did, and set panel state to tab 1. Same thing we did. They don't have anything about push pull. And let's see, this box is fit to content. So if you had made something longer in one or more states, you might be surprised at what happens there. They also have, are they doing global widget styling or manual widget styling? No, they did manual widget styling, which I am just not for. I'm kind of against it. So this means that every time you pulled tabs out, this color is dictated right here for this tab. This color is dictated right here for this tab manually. And this color is dictated right here for this tab. Same for their hover states. It's just a font color change. These are manual styles, and that means you do not have global control over these. We will not find global widget styles that were created for these tabs. So I would say all in all, I don't think I love Axure's tabs as much as I love my own. I think the ones that I've shown you have more flexibility and features and options. So I don't think that I would use Axure's library version because there'd be too much here that I would need to change, especially if I want to get those global widget styles cooking, because not only would you have to create the styles and assign the styles, but you would have to unassign their style. So you'd have to unassign their style and then assign your style. So tabs line selected or unselected, whatever it might be. By then, I feel like you're just doing too much work. You might as well have built it from scratch rather than dragging this out and having to fix and undo these things. So that's a look at tabs, and especially tabs versus Axure's version. I'll see you in the next lesson.